Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there.
Today we are plunging into, well, a really fascinating stack of notes, research, and insights,
Yeah.
all focused on the unique, challenging, but, incredibly rewarding role of the Dungeon Master in tabletop games.
Yeah, think of this deep dive as your sort of essential shortcut to understanding the core principles and the practical applications, too, of guiding players through shared stories in these fantastical worlds.
Right.
It's about getting a solid foundation, really appreciating the sheer craft involved in being a DM.
Our mission for this deep dive is basically to extract the essential nuggets of knowledge, uncover maybe some surprising facts from the material we looked at, and just give you a clearer picture of what it really takes to sit on that side of the screen. Whether you're an experienced player, maybe curious about how the magic happens, or you're an aspiring DM thinking about taking the plunge, or maybe someone just fascinated by the mechanics of, collaborative storytelling.
Yeah.
We're here to unpack this material for you.
Okay, let's get started. I think a good place to begin is looking at what the source material identifies as the core responsibilities of the Dungeon Master. It kind of breaks down the DM's role into 4 fundamental hats they wear at the table.
Right, 4 hats. And the first one is maybe the most obvious one, the referee. This is the DM as the ultimate arbiter, right? When the
Yeah.
rules aren't crystal clear or when a situation comes up that doesn't fit neatly into the mechanics.
Exactly. And what's kind of fascinating here is the emphasis the source places on how this role is performed. It's not about making arbitrary, personal rulings just because you feel like it.
No.
It's about applying the rules fairly to keep the game moving, and crucially, to keep it fun for everyone involved.
Yeah, that fun part seems key.
It really is. And this suggests the DM has to make a judgment call sometimes, maybe with a bit of flexibility, but always, always with an eye towards the table's enjoyment.
Absolutely. You can't let the game just get bogged down in endless rulebook arguments, can you?
Definitely not.
A fair call, made decisively, even if maybe the players don't love the outcome in that second, is usually better than just grinding to a halt.
Well said. Okay, next up, there's the storyteller.
Ah, the creative engine.
Pretty much crafting the engaging adventures, the situations that really draw players into the world. It's about presenting scenarios, conflicts, mysteries that the characters genuinely want to explore and interact with.
So the players aren't just passive observers of a narrative.
Right. They are active participants shaping it.
That's a really key distinction, I think. The DM isn't writing a novel for the players to just sit and listen to. They're setting the stage, they're posing questions, and the players answer those questions with their characters' actions.
Which brings up that classic DM challenge, doesn't it? How do you balance your narrative vision, the cool plot points, the encounters you've planned, with the player's completely unpredictable agency? They'll always surprise you.
Always. Yeah, how do you handle that tension?
Well, the source definitely touches on the need for improvisation here. The storytelling provides the framework, right? The setting, the initial spark, but it's the player's choices that dictate how the story actually unfolds within that structure. You got to roll with it.
Okay, so referee, storyteller. What's the third hat?
The third one is the teacher.
Okay. Makes sense.
Especially when you have new players at the table, or even sometimes when you're just introducing new rules or concepts to an existing group, the DM often takes on the responsibility of guiding everyone through how the game works.
Yeah, I can see that. Explaining the mechanics.
Exactly. Explaining mechanics, setting expectations for the tone and style of the game, and just patiently helping new players understand the flow of gameplay.
Sort of making it accessible.
Precisely. It's about making the game accessible and welcoming, lowering that barrier to entry so that folks new to tabletop RPGs can quickly feel comfortable and, empowered to participate.
And the final core role.
The last one is the Worldbuilder. Even if you're running a game in a well-established, published setting, the DM is the one who breathes life into it. They create or adapt the setting for the adventures, detailing the environments, the cultures, the history, the inhabitants, all of it.
So whether you're just sketching out a single haunted forest for tonight's session, or you're outlining the political factions of an entire continent for a long-running campaign, the DM is the architect of the world the story takes place in.
Exactly. It provides the canvas for the referee and storyteller roles to play out on.
So referee, storyteller, teacher, and world builder. Wow, that's a lot of hats to juggle.
It is, and the source material makes it abundantly clear what the overarching goal is that unites all these roles,
Which is?
facilitating the fun of everyone at the table.
Ah, there it is again. Fun.
It's paramount. All the preparation, the rules, knowledge, the creative energy, it's all in service of making sure everyone, including the DM, has a good time.
That really is the foundation, isn't it? If people aren't having fun, the most intricate plot or the most detailed world, it just doesn't matter.
Not a bit. And the source offers some crucial tips for keeping the fun front and center.
Okay, like what?
First, embrace the shared story. This game is fundamentally a collaborative storytelling activity.
Right, collaborative.
The DM doesn't just tell a story to the players, they create situations that encourage players to contribute through their characters' actions and dialogue. A simple but really powerful technique highlighted is just regularly asking players, okay, what are your characters doing now?
It's a constant invitation for them to take the reins, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Which leads directly to a really critical mindset shift that the source talks about. It's not a competition.
Oh yeah, this is a big one.
Huge. The DM is explicitly not playing against the players. Your job is to provide challenges, yes, definitely, but also to keep the plot moving and, most importantly, to enable the player's heroism.
You're setting up exciting obstacles for the heroes to overcome, not trying to, TPK them or win against them.
Right. You're actually rooting for the players to succeed in overcoming the challenges you present. You want them to feel awesome.
Which ties into the next point, I bet.
It does. Being fair and flexible. Using the rules provides that common framework for fairness, gives everyone a shared language for resolving actions. But the referee role sometimes requires making a decision for the sake of fun or maybe just for narrative flow.
So the source suggests that rules as written, or raw, as people call it, aren't always the only path.
Pretty much. A good DM considers the spirit of the game, the enjoyment of the table, the narrative momentum, even if it means making a judgment call that maybe slightly bends a strict rule interpretation.
Gotcha. Fun, collaboration, flexibility. Sounds like the core guiding principles.
That's a great summary.
Okay, so with those core roles and that philosophy of facilitating fun in mind, let's look at how a typical game session is structured and run according to the source material.
Okay. One interesting practical tool mentioned is something called the 1-hour guideline.
What's that?
It's presented as a way to think about pacing. The idea is that within roughly 1 hour of focused gameplay, a group can usually accomplish several distinct things.
Okay, things like?
Like exploring a single room or maybe a specific location, having a significant conversation with an NPC, solving a puzzle, surviving a trap, or maybe resolving a low-difficulty combat encounter.
Ah, I see. So it gives the DM a sort of tangible benchmark for pacing.
Exactly. If your session is, say, 3 hours long, you might aim for the group to accomplish the equivalent of maybe 9 such things. It helps prevent the session from feeling slow or, like nothing much happened.
Keeps the rhythm going.
Yeah.
So how do you kick things off? How do you start a session?
The source emphasizes beginning the session with a really clear description of the situation. As the DM, you control the information flow, right? You tell the players what their characters see, hear, feel, or know based on the rules and the current game state. So they have the info they need to decide what to do next.
That's why those published adventures often use that read-aloud text, isn't it?
Precisely. It's a curated way to share just enough information to set the scene, but without revealing, hidden details the characters wouldn't immediately perceive. Controlled revelation.
Okay, so the scene is set, players start acting, then what?
Then the DM is responsible for resolving actions. For physical challenges, this often involves ability checks or saving throws, using the dice and the rules to determine success or failure.
Like rolling a dexterity save to dodge a falling boulder, or maybe an athletics check to climb a cliff.
Exactly. And for something like spellcasting, while the player declares they're casting a spell and describes its effect, the DM resolves it. Sometimes you might need to quickly check the spell's text if there's any ambiguity about how it works in this specific situation. It shows how even powerful player actions are resolved within the game's structured framework.
Now, players, they're famously creative, aren't they? They often think of things a DM couldn't possibly anticipate. How does the source address handling that kind of player input and improvisation?
Ah, yes, the curveballs. It specifically points to the yes and principle. It's borrowed from improvisational theater.
Oh, yes and. I've heard of that.
It's a cornerstone technique, really, for weaving player ideas into the narrative rather than just shutting them down flat.
How does it work in practice?
Well, if a player suggests a character action that's reasonable and interesting, the DM says, yes, you can try that, and then crucially adds, and here's what happens, or maybe, and here's the challenge or consequence associated with it.
Could you give an example?
Sure. Say a player asks, can I try to swing from that chandelier across the ballroom to get to the villain?
Okay.
Instead of just saying, no, that's silly, a DM using yes and might say yes, you leap onto the chandelier, make a dexterity acrobatics check. And just so you know, it looks pretty rickety. If you fail that check, you might just bring the whole thing crashing down on yourself and everyone below.
Nice. So it turns a simple player idea into an exciting dynamic moment with potential consequences, all while keeping the story moving.
Exactly. It embraces the player's idea but adds stakes and integrates it into the ongoing situation. The source acknowledges that players will throw curveballs constantly. And while preparation helps a lot, that ability to improvise answers and incorporate player ideas on the fly is just an essential DM skill.
So the basic flow is DM sets the scene, players act. DM resolves and adapts, incorporating player input. And round you go.
Pretty much. And this happens across different types of encounters that make up the adventure.
Right, the source breaks those down, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about navigating those different encounter types. What's first?
First up, exploration encounters. This is when characters are, moving through the world, investigating areas, traveling between locations.
Okay.
The source notes that while you don't always need strict turn order like in combat, sometimes taking turns can be helpful, especially if the party is spread out or doing different things in a complex location. Just ensures everyone gets attention and gets to declare what they're doing.
And you can build tension during exploration too, right?
Absolutely. A simple technique mentioned is just shifting focus right before a crucial moment, like describing the ominous glowing runes on a treasure chest just before the player rolls to try and open it. Little cliffhangers.
Nice. What about ability checks during exploration?
Well, ability checks in exploration are determined by the DM based on whether an action has enough complexity or risk to require a dice roll. Trying to pick a complicated lock, definitely a check.
You're just walking down an empty corridor?
Probably not, unless there's a specific reason, like it's trapped or unstable. The check is for when the outcome is uncertain or failure has consequences.
The source also gets into some practical details that help ground the world, doesn't it? Like movement and visibility.
It does. It gives frameworks for how far characters can see outdoors, depending on conditions: clear day, rain, heavy fog, even underwater visibility.
And that connects to the bigger picture, right? Making the world feel consistent.
Exactly. These details help the DM make the world feel real and consistent, even when describing fantastic environments. It also covers travel over longer distances, breaking journeys into stages, considering the party's chosen pace: normal, fast, or slow.
Right, like moving faster might mean you're less perceptive.
Precisely. And how different types of terrain affect how far the group can travel in a day or an hour. It's not just abstract movement.
And narration during travel is important too, the source says. Not just, okay, 3 days pass.
Right, like a movie montage. The DM uses descriptive text to set the mood, focus on notable details along the journey, maybe a strange ruin glimpsed in the distance, or the changing weather. It makes the travel feel like part of the adventure, not just downtime between locations.
And travel isn't always smooth sailing, is it?
Definitely not. The source talks about obstacles and hazards. These aren't always planned encounters. They can be random events, unexpected combat, maybe like fire elementals suddenly erupting in a burning forest the party is trying to cross.
Or environmental damage.
Yeah, like falling down a slippery slope and taking some damage, or gaining levels of exhaustion from marching through a brutal blizzard without the right gear. These add consequence and make the world feel dynamic and sometimes dangerous.
The source also mentions specific exploration skills, like tracking.
It does, using wisdom, survival checks to follow tracks, and potentially requiring new checks if the conditions change, like after it rains or the terrain becomes much rougher. It's a good example of how specific skills get applied within this exploration pillar of the game.
Okay, so that's exploration. What about the social side? Social interaction encounters.
Right. This is where characters engage with non-player characters, or NPCs. Gathering information, negotiating deals, persuading guards, intimidating thugs, all that good stuff.
And the source emphasizes something important before you even get to these encounters.
Yes, setting expectations. This often happens before the game even begins, maybe during a session 0.
How so?
It involves discussing potentially sensitive topics with your group, using tools like hard and soft limits, sometimes called lines and veils, or using an X card system. An X means something is strictly off limits, maybe un, or veil means proceed with caution or describe it less graphically.
To make sure everyone feels comfortable and respected at the table.
Exactly. The source even suggests gathering anonymous feedback sometimes, so DMs can really understand their players' comfort zones. It's about building trust and safety.
That includes discussing hopes, expectations, and concerns too, right? Finding out what kind of game everyone wants to play.
Absolutely. And what worries they might have. Which, as the source points out, raises an important question for the DM. How do you balance these diverse, sometimes conflicting desires among all the players at your table? It's not always easy.
No, it sounds like a constant negotiation requiring open communication.
It really is, and part of that is understanding the social contract of the game. The DM provides adventure hooks, interesting scenarios.
And the players are generally expected to engage with them.
Yeah, that's the collaborative part. While it's totally fine, even great, for a player to roleplay why their character might be hesitant or need convincing to follow a plot hook.
Right.
The source notes it's generally not okay to just completely invalidate the DM's preparation by willfully ignoring the main hooks or deliberately trying to derail things just for the sake of it. It's about collaborating to find a way into the adventure together.
Makes sense. And using NPCs is obviously fundamental here. Any tips from the source on that?
It suggests thinking about supporting NPCs using archetypes. Things like the comic relief character, the grumpy curmudgeon, the helpful, dutiful assistant. These can help make even minor NPCs distinct and memorable without needing pages of backstory.
What about when NPCs actually join the party? NPCs as party members.
Yeah, that happens.
Huh.
The source gives a key guideline here. NPC party members shouldn't overshadow the player characters.
How do you manage that?
Well, it's just keeping their power level, their challenge rating, usually lower than the PC's current level. And importantly, they generally shouldn't gain experience points or level up alongside the party. The spotlight stays on the heroes.
Keeps the focus where it belongs.
Right. The source even provides optional mechanics for tracking NPC loyalty, maybe using a simple scale, giving DMs a way to mechanically represent an NPC's trustworthiness or relationship with the party if they want that level of detail.
Interesting. Okay, exploration, social. That leaves the third pillar. Combat encounters.
Yep, a common element in many adventures. And the source offers some really practical tips for speeding combat up at the table, which can sometimes drag.
Oh, that's always welcome. What kind of tips?
One great one is simply sharing information more freely, like telling the players the monster's armor class, AC, after they've hit it once or twice.
So they don't have to ask, does a 17 hit every single time?
Exactly. They can just declare, okay, I hit with an 18, that's 12 points of damage. Speeds things up. Similarly, the DM knowing the player's ACs helps speed up monster attack turns.
What about tracking monster hit points?
Usually kept secret by the DM, the source notes, to maintain tension and mystery. But for groups of identical monsters, a useful tip is giving them unique identifiers. Like describing one as the goblin with the notched ear or the skeleton with the cracked skull makes it much easier for the DM to track damage on individuals within the group without slowing down to constantly check notes.
Good tip. And using tactical maps, grids or hexes.
Common, though not mandatory. The source mentions you can use dice as markers or even rulers for range, but grids, usually 5-foot squares, and hexes are popular tools for managing positioning and movement.
And the source clarifies some basic rules for using those.
Yeah, simple things like handling diagonal movement on a grid or determining cover, like half cover or 3/4 cover based on how many lines of sight are blocked when using a map, just helps DMs resolve those common questions quickly and consistently.
Now, narration in combat seems crucial to avoid it just becoming numbers.
Absolutely essential. Instead of just saying, okay, 17 hits, 12 damage, the DM translates the mechanics into vivid descriptions. Your arrow whizzes true, striking the bandit squarely in the shoulder. He cries out as you deal a serious wound.
Brings it to life.
Keeps the combat dynamic and exciting, makes it feel like more than just dice rolls and subtracting hit points.
The source also mentions techniques for maintaining tension during combat.
It does. Specific DM techniques. Like, don't repeat game states if monsters are just chasing a retreating character. Maybe have them try a different tactic next round instead of just chasing again. Mix it up.
Okay.
Another one is hasten a monster's demise. If victory is clearly certain for the players and one monster has like 3 hit points left, maybe just narrate its dramatic defeat for pacing rather than dragging it out for one more hit.
Makes sense, especially if the fight's gone on a while.
Or change the terrain mid-fight. A powerful spell hits a pillar, causing part of the ceiling to collapse, creating new obstacles or cover, keeps things unpredictable.
The source also gives combat encounter difficulty guidelines, right, to help DMs build appropriate challenges.
Yes, using categories like easy, medium, hard, and deadly. It provides frameworks based on character level and the number of monsters to help gauge how tough a fight is likely to be for the party.
And monster tactics are important too. They shouldn't just stand there.
Right. The source suggests thinking about how alerted creatures might react, hiding, fleeing, maybe setting an ambush or fortifying their position, and how prepared defenders might use the environment to their advantage, set up kill zones, use traps.
So the monsters act intelligently, or at least according to their nature.
Exactly. They aren't just bags of hit points waiting to be depleted. They should act in ways that make sense for their situation and intelligence.
And all this ties into managing the overall encounter pace and tension across a whole adventure or session.
Definitely. Successive encounters naturally raise tension as players expend resources, spell slots, hit points, daily abilities. Introducing variety in the types of threats, not just monsters, but environmental hazards, tricky NPCs, and managing when the party can actually take a short or long rest, that all contributes to the tension arc.
Building towards a climax.
Building towards a climax, yeah. Which itself can be varied. Maybe it's not just a big boss fight, but stopping a villain's ritual, dealing with a sudden betrayal, closing a dangerous portal, or escaping a collapsing dungeon. Lots of possibilities.
Okay, so those are the main encounter types. But the source material provides a whole toolbox of specific mechanics and concepts for the DM to draw upon, right?
Oh yeah, a wealth of them.
Let's dive into some of those specifics. Maybe start with ability checks. We mentioned them, but what more does the source say?
It explains when they're used, basically, anytime a character attempts a task where the outcome isn't certain and failure has some meaning. It talks about applying proficiency, that bonus a character gets for being skilled or trained in something, and actually suggests DMs be generous in deciding if a character's proficiency applies to a specific check. If it makes sense, let them add the bonus.
Okay. What about group checks?
Yeah. That's a specific mechanic for when the whole party is trying to do something together and the skilled members might be able to cover for the less skilled, like trying to sneak past guards as a group.
How does it work?
Success usually requires at least half the group succeeding on their individual checks. But the source highlights the important distinction of when not to use them.
Like when?
Well, if one single failure would ruin it for everyone, like that stealth example. If one person trips an alarm, the whole group is caught. Group check isn't appropriate there.
Okay.
Or if only one success is actually needed for the whole group to benefit, like searching a room for a hidden clue. If one person finds it, everyone knows. You don't need half the party to succeed there.
Gotcha. So it's situational.
Very. The source also provides formulas for things like calculated DCs, difficulty classes, often used for saving throws against spells or traps. But it also introduces more nuanced concepts, like success at a cost.
Success at a cost. What's that?
It's a fantastic tool. It's where the DM allows a player to succeed on a check. Maybe they rolled okay, but not great, or the situation is tricky, but there's a significant negative consequence attached.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Maybe you're trying to climb a crumbling wall quickly. The DM might say, okay, you can succeed on the climb, but your favorite hand axe slips from your belt and clatters down into the darkness below. Do you take the success and lose the axe, or accept failure on the climb?
So the choice is put in the player's hands.
Exactly. It increases player agency while still adding stakes and consequences. It's more interesting than just pass-fail.
And similar to that is degrees of failure.
Yeah, same principle. Instead of just failing, the consequences might vary based on how much the character failed by. Failing to disarm a trap by 5 or more might spring it immediately.
Whereas failing by just 1 or 2
might mean it just remains armed, and maybe you wasted some time, but you didn't set it off yet. Again, it adds nuance and narrative richness to the mechanics.
Okay, moving on. What about damage? Does the source offer guidance beyond just monster attacks?
It does. It provides guidelines for improvising damage for unexpected situations, falling rocks, stepping in lava, getting hit by weird magical effects. It gives frameworks based on severity.
So the DM has tools to assign consequences quickly.
Right. Scaling the damage based on how dangerous the situation is meant to feel. Maybe 1d10 for getting burned by hot coals, but something like 24d10 for falling into a vortex of pure fire.
Wow, okay. Big difference.
And it includes things like the damage severity and level table. This helps DMs understand the impact of different damage amounts on characters of different level.
How so?
Well, 10 points of damage might be a mere nuisance to a high-level fighter, barely worth noticing, but that same 10 points could be deadly for a fragile level 1 wizard. It really illustrates the power curve and helps gauge threats appropriately.
That's useful. Does it offer similar guidance for building traps?
Yes, very similar. Tables suggesting appropriate attack bonuses, saving throw DCs, and damage dice for traps based on the character level they're intended for and whether the trap should be a minor setback, nuisance, or potentially lethal.
Okay. What about non-physical threats, like curses?
The source touches on those. It uses spells like Bestow Curse as a benchmark for their power and duration. A curse lasting 1 minute might be like a level 3 spell effect, while one that lasts until dispelled could be equivalent to a level 9 spell. It also mentions cursed creatures like werewolves as examples.
And it goes beyond curses into mental stress.
It does, which is interesting. It gives examples of things that might cause psychic damage or impose conditions like frightened or stunned things like ingesting hallucinogenic substances, prolonged exposure to a terrifying fiendish idol, or even magical traps that fling a character's mind into the far realm. And it suggests these could lead to prolonged effects, 2 minutes of being incapacitated, potentially with alarming behavior or vivid hallucinations described by the DM. It highlights that challenges can impact characters' minds just as much as their bodies.
Adds another dimension to threats. The source even includes optional rules for more technological stuff, firearms and explosives.
Yep. Specific examples like bombs or sticks of dynamite, including their costs, weights, save DCs, and damage types, like fire for bombs, force for dynamite, shows the breadth of potential elements you could include in a game.
Okay. What about the divine side? Religions and gods.
The source discusses this quite a bit. It makes the point that in many game worlds, worship and divine favor aren't always strictly tied to a character's alignment or rigidly following tenets. People might make offerings to appease a god's wrath even if they don't actively worship them.
And clerics don't necessarily need to match their god's alignment perfectly.
Not always, according to this material. Gods can intervene in various ways too, maybe sending emissaries like celestials or fiends, or performing outright miracles, which could be spell effects or any kind of intervention reflecting the god's nature.
So creating religions for your own setting can add a lot of depth.
Absolutely. The source suggests starting with just a list of deities, maybe giving them domains, and then adding details about their followers, beliefs, and practices as needed. It mentions gods from classic settings like the Pantheon of Greyhawk.
We'll come back to Greyhawk later, I think.
Right. And it notes how some deities, like Vecna or Therisden, have an impact that stretches even beyond their homeworld, across the multiverse.
Okay, so players overcome challenges, navigate these threats. What about rewards? How does the source handle that?
Several ways. The primary one is usually character advancement, most often tracked through experience points, XP. The standard way is dividing the total XP value of defeated monsters or overcome challenges among the party members.
Including helpful NPCs who participated.
Yes, the source suggests including them in the XP split too.
But XP isn't the only way, right? The source offers alternatives.
It does. Level advancement without XP is presented as a perfectly valid alternative. Options like session-based advancement.
Leveling up after, say, every 3 sessions.
Something like that, yeah. The source gives suggested pacing. Or there's milestone advancement, where characters level up after achieving significant story goals like clearing a major dungeon, defeating a key villain, or completing an important quest arc.
Why use those instead of XP?
They can be simpler to track, especially for the DM, and they work really well for campaigns that aren't heavily focused on combat, or if you just want to ensure the party stays at roughly the level appropriate for the story you're telling.
Makes sense. What about material rewards? Treasure hoards.
Classic reward. The source provides guidance, often using tables for generating monetary treasure, gold, gems, art objects, and determining the number and type of magic items found, usually based on the challenge rating or significance of the encounter or location where the hoard is discovered.
And it gives a benchmark.
Yeah, it suggests aiming to roll on a treasure hoard table roughly once per session on average, as a way to keep wealth and items flowing into the party at a reasonable rate.
And magic items themselves.
Discussed in detail. It covers rarity common, uncommon, rare, very rare, legendary, and how that often corresponds to character level ranges. It talks about different types, consumable items like potions and scrolls, items that let you cast spells, items that have charges that replenish.
Are there specific examples mentioned?
Yeah, the source often includes sample tables listing items by rarity, things like a bag of holding, uncommon, a periaptive proof against poison, rare, or a staff of charming, rare.
And at the top end, there are artifacts.
Right. Described as incredibly powerful, unique items, often with immense history. Attuning to an artifact can grant amazing properties, resistances, spellcasting abilities, AC bonuses, but they often come with significant drawbacks or curses too. Vulnerabilities, maybe they imprison creatures or even prevent healing. High risk, high reward.
And some magic items are even sentient.
Yes, items with their own personality, goals, and alignment. They could be valuable allies, providing advice and unique powers, or they could be hindrances, working against the player's goals if they don't align. That's a whole different layer of role-playing.
Beyond items and levels, the source mentions other kinds of rewards. Marks of prestige.
It does. Characters can gain fame, influence, and power in the world. This might include receiving land, maybe a small keep, or attractive farmland to manage, which, the source notes, comes with its own set of challenges and responsibilities.
Wow.
Yeah, like becoming an earl or countess, or maybe getting a more whimsical title from an archfey. These might come with minor social benefits or small gifts. Or even special rights like temporary travel permits or trade licenses within a certain kingdom. Rewards that tie the characters more deeply into the fabric of the world.
Okay, one last thing under mechanics. Character management, specifically death scenes. Any interesting tips there?
There's a really nice touch mentioned for handling that tense moment when a player character is at 0 hit points and making death saving throws.
What is it?
The DM can prompt the player to actually roleplay during the saves. On a success, maybe ask them to describe a flickering memory of hope or courage that keeps them fighting. On a failure, maybe a memory of despair or fear that pulls them closer to death.
Oh, that's powerful. Keeps the player engaged even when their character is potentially out of action.
Exactly. It's a small but impactful technique for keeping the player invested and making that life or death struggle feel more personal and dramatic.
So all these mechanics, concepts, rewards, they're all tools in the DM's belt for the big task of building worlds, settings, and adventures.
Precisely. Which is the next major area the source really explores in depth.
Let's start at the micro level, creating dungeons. What guidance is there?
Well, first it notes that dungeons can vary wildly based on their origin. Is it a natural cave system, an ancient crumbling temple, a wizard's fortified tower, a dragon's lair, or just some smelly goblin caves? The origin informs the design.
And the inhabitants matter too, right?
Absolutely. A dungeon designed by, say, hobgoblins focused on defense will look very different from one inhabited by sneaky, trap-loving Yuan-Ti snake people. Form follows function and inhabitant.
The source suggests adding dungeon quirks.
Yeah, using tables or just brainstorming ideas to give the dungeon a distinctive character. Maybe it was built by a paranoid lich or carved out by giants. Maybe its purpose was unusual, like a magical laboratory. Or its location is exotic. Maybe it's partially submerged beneath an underground sea or built on the back of a colossal slumbering creature.
Wow, okay, that adds flavor.
Or maybe its history is key. It's an abandoned mine haunted by the ghosts of miners, or it exists partially on another plane of existence. Little details make it memorable.
What about mapping principles?
Usually based on a grid, typically 5-foot squares. Key principles mentioned include using asymmetry. Symmetrical layouts are often boring. Asymmetry creates more interesting spaces to explore. Incorporating 3-dimensional layouts is big too. Stairs, pits, balconies, multiple levels add tactical challenge and exploration depth.
Adding natural features.
Right, like underground streams, chasms, cave formations integrated into the man-made structure makes it feel more organic. And of course, including secrets, secret doors, hidden rooms. But they should ideally have a purpose, not just be random. Maybe hide a valuable treasure, a shortcut, or lore about the dungeon's history.
The source mentioned an interesting point about crypts.
Yeah, as an example of purpose-influencing design. A crypt built by people terrified of their dead rising might have features designed to make it easy to get into for burial rites, but incredibly difficult for undead to get out of. Conversely, one built fearing tomb robbers might be easy to leave but hard to enter undetected. The builder's worries shape the layout. Guard posts near entrances are also common.
Okay, so that's dungeons. Moving up a level, creating adventures. How does the source frame that?
It emphasizes thinking about adventures as situations presented to the players, rather than rigid, linear narratives. The adventure is what unfolds as the players interact with and respond to the situation the DM sets up.
This relates back to that idea of avoiding railroading, doesn't it?
Exactly. It touches on guide rails and railroads. Players need to feel like their choices matter, that they have agency and can impact the story. The source advises avoiding railroading, forcing players down a single predetermined path regardless of their actions,
How do you avoid it?
by planning multiple ways to progress. If finding a specific clue is crucial, have several ways the players might uncover it. If they need to get past a certain obstacle, think of a few different approaches they might take: stealth, combat, diplomacy, clever spell use. Or have alternative outcomes ready if they fail a key check on one path. Maybe things get harder, but the story doesn't just stop.
So challenges with only one single solution.
Should ideally only lead to optional rewards or benefits, according to the source. They shouldn't be required to simply continue the main adventure, as that can feel very restrictive if the players can't figure out that one specific solution.
Makes sense. So where do you start when creating an adventure? What's the adventure premise?
It's that initial situation that grabs attention. A rumor of a lost dungeon filled with treasure, a nearby kingdom preparing for war, strange monsters migrating into settled lands, a comet appearing in the sky, causing weird magic, a mysterious portal opening in the woods. Even something simple like the party wanting a specific magic item known to be hidden in a particular dangerous place.
And a premise needs conflict, right?
Absolutely. That's the engine of the adventure. Conflict could come from a specific villain with nefarious plans, monsters menacing a region, an evil organization, a rivalry between factions, an impending natural disaster, or even potentially internal party conflict if the group enjoys that style.
The source provides adventure situations by level, doesn't it, to give DMs ideas?
It does, grouping potential adventure hooks into tiers of play. Like for levels 1 to 4, local heroes tier, ideas might include investigating ruins under a curse, dealing with a new bandit captain taking over the roads, or exploring a nearby abandoned mine.
And for higher levels, say 11-16, Masters of the Realm.
The stakes get higher. Ideas there might involve a portal to the abyss opening up, needing to be closed, an adult dragon actively transforming the landscape to suit itself, or maybe dealing with the rise of a powerful lich or vampire lord. The threats become regional or even world-spanning.
Adventure maps are important too.
Essential for locations, yeah. The source describes them as functioning almost like flowcharts, showing connections between areas and potential decision points for the players. And maps should reflect the inhabitants' needs. A carrion crawler layer probably needs wide passages they can actually fit through. Common map symbols are often used for clarity.
What about the adventure inhabitants, not just random monsters?
Ideally, no. The source encourages thinking about them as an ecology. Fungi, mundane animals, dangerous beasts, intelligent scavengers, maybe even sapient creatures all coexisting or competing within that environment makes the location feel more alive and believable.
And designing adventures was something for everyone, catering to different player tastes.
Yeah, trying to balance opportunities for exploration, social interaction, and combat. Not every player enjoys the same things equally. And encounters can even combine these elements.
Like how?
Maybe the party has to fight their way through some knoll guards, combat, only to find they need to persuade or bargain with the captured dragon the gnolls were guarding, social interaction, to get the information they need to navigate the rest of the dungeon exploration. Blending the pillars keeps things varied.
The source lists some specific adventure examples too, right? As potential starting points.
It does, often referencing published modules, things like The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh or The Sunless Citadel for low levels, or maybe something like The Wild Sheep Chase for mid-levels. Just examples to illustrate the concepts.
Okay, so that's adventures. What about stringing them together into campaigns?
For long-term play, the source recommends keeping a campaign journal. This is for the DM to track past events, unresolved plot threads, important NPCs, player character details, promises made, enemies created, all that stuff.
Why is that important?
It helps maintain consistency over months or even years of play. It allows the DM to weave past events back into the story, making the players feel like their actions have lasting consequences and that their history matters. It really boosts player investment.
Sustaining excitement in a long campaign takes effort, though.
It really does. The source suggests actively bringing closure to old storylines while simultaneously building on recent player actions. Maybe the players decided to buy and fix up an old tavern earlier in the campaign. Great! Now you can design some tavern-based adventures around that investment.
Using player goals to drive future plots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are the characters' ambitions? What loose ends did they leave dangling? Those are fantastic sources of inspiration for future adventure hooks that feel personally relevant to the party.
And the source says it's okay to end campaigns.
Yes. It explicitly says it's okay for campaigns to reach a satisfying conclusion, Maybe the players even offer ideas for a sequel or a new campaign in the same world. Or, surprisingly, it even suggests that if a player has a really strong idea for a campaign and the current DM maybe wants a break or wants to play,
They could switch roles.
yeah, the group might decide to let that player take over as DM for the next campaign. It emphasizes the collaborative nature, even at the level of who runs the game.
Campaigns can also be shaped by genres and settings. What does the source say about that?
It defines a couple of common fantasy subgenres. Heroic fantasy is seen as the default D&D style adventurers, fighting monsters, exploring dungeons, generally being heroic, maybe saving the kingdom.
And sword and sorcery.
That's described as often being a bit grimmer, maybe more morally ambiguous. Worlds might be harsher, villains more insidious like evil spellcasters, and protagonists might be motivated more by self-interest, wealth, or survival than pure altruism. Think Conan the Barbarian.
It also mentions war campaigns as a focus.
Yeah, campaigns centered around large-scale conflict between nations, or maybe freedom fighters battling a tyrant, or even delving into ancient wars where the original cause has been long forgotten but the fighting continues.
And crossing the streams, mixing genres.
Right. The source acknowledges D&D's roots actually include sci-fi and sci-fantasy elements, so campaigns can incorporate things like travel through magic mirrors to other worlds, starships navigating wild space, like in Spelljammer, or even settings where laser pistols exist alongside magic wands. The system is flexible.
It mentions specific published settings too.
Lots of them get name-dropped. Spelljammer, Strixhaven, Magic School, Theros, Mythic Greece-inspired. And the big ones, like the Forgotten Realms, mentioning places like Waterdeep and figures like Laeral Silverhand or Xanathar the Beholder. And of course, Greyhawk, which it goes into more detail on.
But you can also create your own setting.
Absolutely.
Right.
The big advantage mentioned is total creative control. The players will never know more about the world than you do because you made it.
Any advice on how to start?
Start small. Don't try to detail the entire planet, its history, and its pantheon before session 1. Focus on the starting location, maybe a single village, a city neighborhood, even just a tavern and its immediate surroundings. Develop a few interesting local attractions, like a nearby haunted ruin or a small dungeon.
And then build outwards.
Exactly. Build out from there based on where the players actually go and what interests them. Don't over-prepare areas they're unlikely to visit anytime soon. Let the world grow organically around the campaign.
Okay, so you have a setting, maybe an adventure idea. How do you actually get the campaign started? Starting a campaign.
You need character hooks. How do the player characters, who might be strangers, meet and get involved in that first adventure?
What are some common ways?
The source mentions happenstance. Maybe they all independently answered the same adventurer's wanted notice, or they meet by chance in a tavern or on the road, or maybe they're all captured or trapped together and have to cooperate to escape.
Or mutual acquaintance.
Right. Maybe they're all contacted by a trusted NPC patron who brings them together for a specific mission.
You also need that detailed starting location you mentioned.
Yeah, that initial hub.
Yeah.
Detailed enough so players can connect their characters to it, maybe have some local contacts or knowledge, and then you need that first adventure, whether it's a published one or something you've homebrewed, to launch the campaign from that starting location.
And campaigns can have different structures, episodic versus serialized.
Exactly. Episodic campaigns are more like a TV series with self-contained adventures each week or session. There might be recurring characters or locations, but each adventure largely stands on its own. There might even be significant time gaps between them.
And serialized.
That's more like a continuous story, like a novel or a prestige TV drama. There are overarching threats, major plot lines that develop over many sessions, and the outcome of one adventure directly impacts the next. The source suggests serialized is often good for regular groups who enjoy suspense and long-term character development.
Okay, now let's do that deeper dive into one specific setting mentioned frequently. Greyhawk.
All right. Greyhawk is one of the original D&D settings, created by Gary Gygax. It's set on a world called Earth, primarily in a continent called the Flannis.
And its premise, what kind of fantasy is it?
The source describes it as leaning towards heroic fantasy, but definitely incorporating strong sword and sorcery elements. It's known for classic, often challenging dungeons like White Plume Mountain or Tomb of Horrors. Conflict examples given might involve young dragons trying to carve out territory, clashing with organized villain groups, or maybe cults trying to resurrect ancient evils.
It features iconic villains like EU is the evil.
Yes, EU's is a major one. A specific Cambion demigod villain described as the hideous son of a demon lord and a powerful archmage. He's constantly scheming to reclaim lands he considers his and seeking powerful artifacts to increase his might. Thwarting EU's often involves stopping his agents from acquiring these artifacts or battling his monstrous armies, like the Wegweir hordes mentioned.
Greyhawk even has its own unique calendar.
It does. A standard year length, but with unique names for the 12 months, like Needfest, Fireseek, Readying, and 4 seasonal festivals. Even the days of the week have specific names. Star Day, Sunday, Moon Day, God's Day, Water Day, Earth Day, Free Day. It adds a layer of specific fantasy flavor to timekeeping.
And specific groups like the Knights of the Watch.
Right. A specific military order detailed in the source, sworn to a disciplined code, primarily focused on defending the borders of certain nations against hostile neighbors and monstrous threats, like giants and dragons, adds texture to the political and military landscape.
What about the gods of Greyhawk?
The source mentions a table listing popular deities, distinguishing between greater gods, lesser gods, and demigods. It highlights that some, like Tharizdun, the chained god, and Vecna, the lich god, have influence and worshippers far beyond Greyhawk, impacting the wider multiverse. Others are more localized.
The key location is the free city of Greyhawk itself.
Yes, the setting's namesake. Described as having a kind of frontier spirit, tough, rowdy, independent, and a major hub for adventurers seeking fame and fortune, a classic starting point for campaigns.
The source gives city details, like gates and crime.
It does. Mentions distinct gates like the highway gate, cargo gate, garden gate, and notes which ones are open day and night versus those closed from dusk till dawn, requiring special permission or bribes to pass through after hours. It also touches on how crime is handled, distinguishing between minor and major crimes and their typical punishments, and notes on religion temples to various gods are common, but openly practicing faiths certified as evil is generally not tolerated by the authorities.
Are there key locations in Greyhawk City highlighted?
Several. The Library of Greyhawk is mentioned, run by a head librarian named Abra Sagast, described as a chaotic, good, dragonborn archmage. It's a repository of lore where adventurers or their hirelings can research topics like legends, creature weaknesses, or the history of magic items.
Any inns mentioned?
2 specific ones. The Hightower Inn, catering to wealthier clientele, a good place for upper crust rumors or maybe encountering powerful NPCs, and the Silver Dragon Inn, located in the Foreign Quarter, described as lively.
The Silver Dragon has a secret, right?
It does. The proprietor, a fellow named Morley, is secretly an adult copper dragon. Chaotic good. He's described as a sort of secret weapon for the city, known to only a few powerful figures, like members of the Circle of Eight. He might discreetly help valorous heroes, perhaps by loaning them needed magic items if they prove themselves worthy. A great potential patron or source of aid.
What about nearby attractions outside the city walls?
The source lists several famous adventuring sites. The Cairn Hills nearby are filled with ancient burial mounds, tombs, ruins, and generally lower-level monsters good for starting adventurers. Then there's the legendary Castle Greyhawk, the sprawling, ruined castle and dungeon complex built by the mad archmage Zagi Gyurargar, famously filled with bizarre traps, monsters, and even portals to other planes. And White Plume Mountain, another classic high-level dungeon known for holding powerful magic weapons and being associated with the evil archmage Caraptus.
The source also gives brief descriptions of surrounding regions. The Eastern Flannis.
Yeah, just quick sketches to give a feel for the wider world. Mentions places like the Duchy and County of Ernst, important trade nations, the Shield Lands, constantly threatened, the dangerous Troll Fens, the northern kingdoms of Kriski, Frusti, and Schnei, barbarian lands with raiding traditions, Ratik, a former province defending against raiders, and the Wegweir nomads, currently battling Urus's forces. Gives a sense of the political complexity in varied environments.
And regions of Old Keel land to the south and west.
Similar brief descriptions. Bissell, a contested borderland. Jeff, isolated battling giants. Grand March, a vassal state. And the Hold of the Sea Princes, an independent oligarchy with a powerful navy. Just enough to spark ideas for adventures in those areas.
Okay, so that's a deep dive into Greyhawk. But the source goes even wider, exploring the planes of the multiverse.
It does. The multiverse is described as consisting of many different planes of existence beyond the prime material plane where most campaigns are set.
It categorizes them, right? Starting with the inner planes.
Yes. These are the planes of raw elemental forces, fire, water, air, and earth, and also the para-elemental planes where they border each other, creating realms of smoke, steam, ice, and ooze. The source notes that regions bordering the material plane might resemble it somewhat, but the deeper you go, the more extreme the element becomes. They're home to creatures like genies, elementals, and mephits.
Then there are the outer planes.
These are realms shaped by belief, philosophy, and morality. They directly affect visitors morally and spiritually. They're the homes of cosmic beings like celestials, angels, etc. on the upper planes, planes of good, and fiends, devils and demons, on the lower planes, planes of evil. But also other beings like the lawful Modrons on Mechanus or the chaotic Slotty on Limbo.
How do they look?
They can appear familiar sometimes, mountains, forests, cities, but the source says they can change at the whim of the powerful beings who rule them or reflect the dominant alignment or philosophy of the plane.
And planar travel is usually difficult.
Typically legendary, yeah. The most common method mentioned is via planar portals. These are often stationary, specific links between 2 points on different planes. They can look like anything: doorways, shimmering pools, vortices in the sky. Portals often have power guardians.
Other ways to travel.
The source mentions Yggdrasil, the cosmic world tree, whose branches and roots connect various worlds and planes, possibly with guides to help navigate. Other methods include epic dreaming, specific magical voyages, like using spelljammer ships through wild space to reach the astral plane, or traveling via the Shadowfell or Feywild. Powerful spells like teleportation circle or plane shift, or finding rare nexus points locations that somehow exist simultaneously in multiple worlds or planes.
The source gives adventure hooks on planes too.
Yeah, examples like seeking an ancestor's blessing in Elysium, retrieving a stolen holy weapon from the Nine Hells, or freeing an imprisoned titan from Pandemonium. The planes offer truly epic-scale adventure possibilities.
It goes into detail on some specific planes, like the Abyss.
Oh yeah. The Abyss is described as the embodiment of chaos and evil. Infinitely vast, hostile, largely uncharted. A journey there is framed as a descent into darkness, confronting not just external demons, but potentially one's own inner evil.
It has layers, right?
Countless layers. The source mentions a few key ones. The plane of infinite portals, the first layer, a chaotic gateway. Azagrat, realm of the demon lord Grast, known for decadent cities. The demon web, Loth's domain. Gaping Maw, Demogorgon's lair. Thanatos, Orcus's lair of undead. The slime pits, home to Jublex and Zuckmoy. The death dells, Yunoku's hunting grounds. And the endless maze, Baphomet's lair. Each reflects its ruler's nature.
What about a contrasting plane, like Arborea?
Arborea is described as a plane of wild passions and extremes. Towering mountains, deep gorges, impossibly large trees, vibrant fields, home to nature spirits like satyrs and dryads. The air itself is charged with excitement, prone to sudden storms or spontaneous bursts of music. It even has a psionic wind effect that can cause random psychic effects on visitors.
The astral plane is mentioned as a travel hub.
Often, yes. A silvery void used to travel between the outer planes or to reach distant worlds on the material plane via wild space. Encounters there might be with other travelers, celestials, fiends, Githyanki, who have cities there, like Tunarath, ruled by the Lich Queen Vlaakith. Maybe even stranger things. It has drifting islands of solid matter and occasional psychic storms.
Briefly, the elemental planes, air and fire.
The plane of air is mostly open sky, clouds, constant winds ranging from breezes to hurricanes with few solid landmarks. The plane of fire is described as having a blazing sun, fierce winds carrying ash, and seas of fire. The air is breathable but requires protection outside specific safe zones like the famous City of Brass.
The City of Brass.
Home of the Ifrit, fire genies, described as ornate but reflecting their cruel nature, ruled by an emperor from the Charcoal Palace, a major planar metropolis.
What about good-aligned planes? Elysium or Mount Celestia?
Elysium is a plane of peacefulness and goodness, layered with idyllic landscapes, Amoria, Aronia, etc. Adventures there might involve proving oneself worthy of blessings or overcoming personal selfishness. Mount Celestia is the seven heavens, the epitome of law and good, rising layer by layer from a silver sea, home to angels and champions of justice. Visitors can find peace, but the source notes evil can gain a foothold through hidden shame or sins. It mentions Imperia, a city known for healing fountains, and that Bahamut, the platinum dragon god, resides here.
UNCAiNNY, the plane of law.
Yeah, pure clockwork order. Home of the Modrons. Adventures there might challenge characters' sense of self versus the collective good, promoting selflessness or maybe asserting individuality against rigid conformity.
Negative and positive planes.
Two sides of the energy coin. The negative plane is the source of entropy and undeath, a void that drains life and vitality, fostering apathy and despair. Contains dangerous void stones of solid negative matter. The positive plane is the opposite, the source of raw life force and radiant energy, like the heart of a star, empowering but potentially overwhelming.
9 hell.
The plane of lawful evil, structured in 9 descending layers. No direct portals between lower layers, by order of Asmodeus. The source mentions Avernus, the first layer, a battleground. Malebolge, a layer of ruined mountains. Maladomini, ruled by Baalzebul, lord of flies filled with decaying cities. Caninia, a frozen hellscape ruled by Mephistopheles. And Nessus, the deepest layer, home to Asmodeus and his fortress Melchim. A place of tyranny, corruption, and binding contracts.
Outlands. Another hub.
Turn of the neutral ground of the outer planes, closest to the material plane. It features numerous gate towns, each town having a permanent portal to one specific outer plane. For example, Plaguemort leads to the Abyss, Ribcage to the Nine Hells, Sylvania to Arborea. Makes it a common crossroads for planar travelers and adventurers.
Pandemonium. Sounds fun.
Plane of madness and winds, described as having incessant howling winds that drive visitors to the brink of sanity. Just existing there is exhausting. Basic tasks become aggravating. Layers include Phlegethon and Casitas.
Briefly, Ravenloft.
Mentioned as domains within the Shadowfell, places of gothic horror ruled by Dark Lords. Specific domains like Barovia, with Strahd von Zarovich, Borca, ruled by poisoners, and Falkovnia, overrun by zombies under a military tyrant, are named as examples.
Sigil, the City of Doors.
A unique location. A city built on the inside of a giant ring floating atop an infinitely tall spire in the Outlands. Famous for its countless portals, often disguised as ordinary doors or arches that can lead to any other plane. Extremely cosmopolitan, filled with creatures from across the multiverse coexisting uneasily. Ruled by the enigmatic, incredibly powerful Lady of Pain. A gnome artificer named Vi is mentioned as having her headquarters there.
And Ysgard.
A rugged, chaotic good plane of heroic conflict. Floating islands, mountains, fjords, eternal battlefields. Home to giants, dragons, and spirits of warriors. Heroes go there to test their mettle against the plane itself and its inhabitants. Glory through combat is key.
Wow, that covers a huge range of environments and themes. The source also mentions specific famous people or groups.
Yeah, quite a few get name-dropped throughout the material, often tied to specific items, locations, or settings. People like Baba Yaga, Archhag, Bahamut, Dragon God, Uriel, Druid creator of the Deck of Many Things, Kaz the Betrayer, vampire who fought Vecna, Caraptus, evil archmage of White Plume Mountain, Chaos, worm that walks, an elder evil, Lurel Silverhand, ruler of Waterdeep, Vecna, lich god, Vlakith, Githyanki lich queen, Xanathar, beholder crime lord, plus adventuring parties like the Fallbacks and Valor's Call. Just adds flavor and connection to D&D lore.
Okay, one last major section the source covers, East Player Bastions or Strongholds. Tell us about that.
This is a specific subsystem presented for players to acquire, customize, and manage their own base of operations. A castle, a tower, a guild hall, whatever fits.
How does it work? You add facilities.
Exactly. You can add things like defensive walls, which have a cost, build time, and provide benefits against attacks. Basic stuff like corridors and stairs are usually free. Facilities take up space, measured in roomy or vast squares on a potential map, and often come with associated hirelings.
And the DM can give those hirelings personality.
Yeah, encouraged to. Makes the Bastion feel more alive. Then, the core gameplay loop involves players issuing facility orders. These usually take a set amount of time, like 7 days, and often cost money. The specific orders depend on the type of facility.
Can you give some examples of orders?
Sure. A craft facility lets hirelings make non-magical items, like adventuring gear, or if the character overseeing it is high enough level 9+ mentioned, they can even craft common or uncommon magic items from specific lists, possibly requiring the character's direct involvement if spells are involved.
What about a trade facility, like a gaming hall?
That order lets you try and turn a profit. You roll on a table to see if the gambling den made money or lost money during that period.
A harvest order for a garden.
Lets you collect useful items, maybe decorative flowers for perfume or edible plants that count as rations. Different garden types yield different things.
A recruit order for a guild hall.
Allows hirelings to find new guild members who can then be sent on specific assignments. An adventurer's guild might track a beast. A baker's guild might cater an event for payment or a favor. A mason's guild might even build a defensive wall for free or take on construction jobs.
What about recruiting for a menagerie?
Similar recruit order, but the hirelings try to capture or acquire creatures from a table to add to the Bastion's menagerie, which can hold creatures of different sizes.
An empower order for a sanctum.
Hirelings perform rites for 7 days, granting a designated beneficiary temporary hit points equal to their character level after each long rest. The Sanctum also enhances the Word of Recall spell, allowing it to target the Sanctum and granting a heal spell effect to one creature arriving via that smell.
And research orders for an archive or trophy room.
These let hirelings research helpful lore. The archive functions similarly to the legend lore spell. The trophy room lets them research a specific topic, legend, creature, object, and provide up to 3 relevant, previously unknown facts. Doesn't even require related trophies to be on display.
So this whole system lets players invest downtime and resources into building something tangible.
Exactly. It formalizes player investment in the world beyond just adventuring, provides meaningful downtime activities, lets them leverage their success to gain different kinds of advantages, and makes them feel more rooted in the game world.
The source even includes random Bastion events.
Yeah, little things that might happen between orders. Fixing leaks, finding a stray dog, getting a mysterious letter, dealing with rotten supplies, maybe even a minor haunting. Just small flavor events to make the Bastion feel like a living, breathing place with its own minor dramas.
And a Bastion tracker sheet to manage it all.
Yep, a sheet for players to keep track of their facilities, hirelings, orders, and resources. It really shows how the DM's world building and the player's actions can intertwine to create lasting impacts and ongoing stories centered around their own base.
It definitely demonstrates that being a DM involves managing not just the adventure at hand, but the long-term consequences and growth stemming from the player's journey and success.
Absolutely. It's a big picture role.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. Let's try to recap. We've explored the multifaceted role of the DM referee, storyteller, teacher, and world builder, and that core principle of facilitating fun.
Right. We looked at how to structure and run a game session, techniques for handling different types of encounters, exploration, social interaction, combat, all the pillars.
We dove into various game mechanics and concepts the DM uses, from ability checks and damage calculations to traps, mental stress effects, and different kinds of rewards like magic items, prestige, and even player-run strongholds.
Yeah, and we discussed building worlds, designing adventures that offer player choice, structuring campaigns over the long haul, and we explored examples like the classic Greyhawk setting and the wider cosmology of the planes of existence.
The deep dive is really all about taking this kind of complex information and trying to make it accessible, maybe even actionable. Hopefully this conversation has given you, our listener, a much clearer picture of the DM's role and the incredible possibilities within these tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah, for you, the listener, whether you're a player who maybe wants to appreciate the incredible effort your DM puts in just a little bit more, or perhaps you're someone curious about trying your hand at DMing yourself, maybe feeling a bit intimidated but also excited, or even if you're just interested in the fascinating mechanics behind how these fantasy worlds are built and run.
Here's where it gets really interesting, thinking about what it all means.
What does this all mean for you? I think it means that the DM is so much more than just someone who knows the rules or reads from a book. They are the central facilitator of this dynamic, shared creative experience, constantly juggling narrative threads, mechanical rulings, improvisation, and the needs, desires, and fun of everyone else at the table.
It's a demanding role, no doubt.
Definitely demanding, but also one that allows for incredible creativity and, honestly, provides immense satisfaction in bringing a world and a story to life alongside your friends.
So what does this all mean? I guess it means the DM's craft really lies in that constant fluid context switching, moving seamlessly between being the rules arbiter, the engaging storyteller, the patient teacher, the world architect,
Yeah.
all to create a cohesive and hopefully fun experience.
Well put. And that leads us nicely into our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given that constant need for a DM to juggle being a strict rule interpreter, a creative storyteller, a patient guide, and an architect of the world, which of those balancing acts do you think is the most challenging for a DM to consistently pull off? And why might the answer be different depending on the specific group of people playing the game?
That's a good one. Something to mull over until next time. Join us then for another deep dive.